So the new Blood Angels points have gone live. Sanguinary Guard are 135 points and new style Mephiston is 125. There's several FAQs and a bunch of units to Legends, so let's talk about all that's changed for the Sons of Sanguinius. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking Blood Angels, and in this one I thought we'd go through the new and updated points for the Codex that have just gone live. It seems that this week was the one for the big 40k points update, and it seems likely that it was going to be this week, given that the Blood Angels Codex has its full launch where it appears in stores and gets posted out on Saturday, and typically Games Workshop tends to update Codex points on the digital updates the week before and tie it in with a balanced data slate or field manual if there happens to be one coming out. It's quite nice that the Blood Angels are now finally out of limbo. The big launch box with the Death Company and Lamartes and Asterath in it came out towards the end of summer, so I've had the full rules for them for really quite a long time now, though it has been kind of frustrating as we know in 10th edition, the points in the Codex are generally just a placeholder for the digital ones updated in the Minotaur and Field Manual. So if you've been playing games with the new Codex, they've been sort of like the best guess of what the points might be, as opposed to 100% confirmed from Games Workshop. Today though, it's really quite a big update for the Sons of Sanguinius. Points cost in the Minotaur and Field Manual have been revealed. There's been the Codex FAQ and errata for the Blood Angels, and also the Legends document has been updated with the units removed from the Codex. The new Combat Patrol document is also up to download online as well. Being a Blood Angels player myself, I was certainly interested to see what was coming for them. They've generally been doing rather well in 10th edition so far. Win rates are around about 52% or so since they updated that Sons of Sanguinius detachment earlier in 2024. And at least on paper it was still looking very, very scary for the Liberator Assault group, pretty much still keeping the best bits of the Sons of Sanguinius, but also getting access to Advance and Charge for a 1 command point stratagem, plus also a Fights First enhancement, both of which look kind of set to add some genuine significant strength there. In any case, let's go through what we've got, talking through the units and their points and updates one by one. First up, the Sanguinary Guard are 135 points per 3 of them, or 270 per 6. The previous 5-man squads of them were 155, and in general it felt to me like the numbers on the new style 3-man squad weren't really that far behind the old 5-man Sanguinary Guard squad. Per model they'd got way more dangerous, more attacks, more strength and more AP if you took the Oncarmine Blades, and on the defensive they got +1 wound and a 4+ invulnerable save as well, meaning that they were tougher against some things but less tough against others. My initial impressions of the unit were that they should probably be a little bit cheaper than the previous ones, but I thought that 140 to 145 points would have them be pretty reasonable, so I think that 135 points is really quite a good value. It seems that in game terms they're particularly relevant now as the only Blood Angels jump unit with full damage 2 weapons. The Death Company can still take a fair amount of them, but they can't take a full squad anymore, and it perhaps means that they're best suited to be the heavy hitters with jump back assaults for the chapter. Obviously the models weren't exactly well received, and part of me does wonder whether or not this is a little bit of Games Workshop going for quite a strong points cost to encourage a few model sales here. They certainly don't always do it with new kits, but it maybe feels a little bit suspicious when the occasional kit does get incredibly good rules when it comes out, but I'd still much rather the Sanguinary Guard be a strong relevant unit than a sort of borderline or niche one. On top of the update, they also got 2 errata things that I think made a whole load of sense. For some reason their war gear options were just weirdly restrictive. They could only take 1 Inferno pistol per entire squad, now it's 1 per 3 as you get with the kits, and previously you either had to take entire squads of blades or spears, which didn't really seem like the absolute worst thing in the world, as quite a lot of other units are restricted in that kind of way with war gear. Maybe it's a little bit more awkward though if the actual models pictured on the box are fighting with a mix of them though, and then you can't equip them like that. Currently with the rules the way they are, I feel like the blades are really the way to go. You just don't gain that much for going for spears, though I must admit I'm kind of tempted just to assemble with a mix of both of them and then just be clear in communication as to which one they're playing as this game, just for rule of cool and looks purposes. In any case though, I suspect they're looking rather solid and scary. Before we move on, I thought I'd just give a quick shout out to today's video sponsor, Great Art Studio, who've been making big waves in the Blood Angels community recently with their Crimson Lords upgrades, themed aesthetic style upgrades for angelic heroes and power armor that could be used for 40k or for other things. It's really quite a big roster of parts and bits that could be useful for representing a whole bunch of Blood Angels units in game, and they're available in 2 different ways, either as STL designs that you can 3D print off. It's all the designs for $39 in a kind of ridiculous Kickstarter style campaign on My Mini Factory that's gained a crazy $108,000 worth of funding, or as physical bits and parts shipped out by only games based in the UK. in general with prices a bit more generous than Games Workshop's upgrade sprues. Just for a few tastes of them, here are some cool jetpacks, notably with wings for this version, just in case you should happen to have a requirement to have some models with some angelic wings. Shields and melee weapons can be a good way to add a good bit of personality to a 40k army. I feel like the shields would work quite nicely on Blade Guard or Assault Terminators. They've got loads of other weapon bits, of course. And there's a whole bunch of character upgrade things as well. For example, this Priest Battle Pack. Combine £8 or $10 worth of bits with an appropriate miniature, and you could have a character piece costing far less than normal. There's plenty of other bits and part sets out there as well for different units. This Rage Pack's one example for $20 or £16. And hopefully there should be some good options for a bunch of collectors out there. In any case, feel free to check them out, linked in the video description, and a big thank you to them for sponsoring the video. Moving on with the Blood Angels units points though, and next up we have the Jump Pack Death Company, maybe the other unit that I was really quite interested to see the final cost on. It seems that they're one of these interesting different points for different unit size units, with 130 points per 5 of them, or 240 per 10. I feel it's a bit weird to have the cheap squad cost more, and it likely represents the fact that they can take an extra Power Fist in the first set of 5 rather than the second set. Though pre-Codex they often tend to be fielded in a big unit with say Martis to escort them up the board, and with the points difference I kind of feel like the 240 point squad might be the more efficient at that cost. Previously there were 140 points or 280 points for 5 and 10, but that was the loadout that had full Power Fists and full Inferno pistols, and they've dropped down from that to 3 Power Fists, 2 Eviscerators and the rest chainswords. So in terms of melee power I feel like they haven't really decreased all that much in points cost for significantly less hitting power. They're an important unit for Astorath and the Martis, and they can't join anything else, so if they're going anywhere it's here. I think my impression is though that they're just a bit less good than the previous squad at initial impressions. I sort of feel like they might have flipped a bit, with the Sanguinary Guard now being the mainstay unit and the Death Company being the slightly more niche extra add-on that you might take, when pre-Codex I would have probably said it was the other way round. The On Foot Death Company are both 90 points per 5 of them or 180 per 10. These don't get quite as many fancy melee weapons as the jump ones for some reason. They get 1 Power Fist per unit and then 1 Eviscerator per 5 models in the units, so 3 damage 2 weapons for the 10-man units rather than 5. The ones that get the chainswords either get sustained hits 1 or sustained hits 2 if they're below half strength, and all the Death Company get their feel no pain and their reroll hits in melee. The Bolt Rifle Death Company still get the big fancy big hitting weapons, but then have the rest as bolt rifles so they don't have as much AP or attacks in melee. And their special rule is either free Overwatch that they can reroll or free Heroic Intervention that they can reroll. I feel like these guys might just be in a slightly awkward spot where they might struggle to justify a chaplain but be bad on objectives without one. Maybe you might weigh up something like 10 Death Company Marines with a chaplain versus 10 Assault Intercessors with a Sanguinary Priest or Captain perhaps. At least on paper both of them seem to have their advantages, though they'll both be units that tend to be a bit better at destroying enemy infantry as opposed to punching off against tanks and vehicles. For the Blood Angels' own tanks and vehicles though, we've got the Death Company Brutalis Dreadnought. This one's 180 points, where the regular Brutalis is 160. For the upgrade, you get the 6+ Feel No Pain that Death Company things get, 4 reroll hits in melee, which is very nasty on a Brutalis profile, and then it swaps out its Mortal Wound special rule for a Surge move one. When it gets shot, it moves closer towards you, potentially jumping into melee, which could be very problematic on the mid-board objectives. It does lose its Mortal Wound impact hits though, and its Objective Control 0 without a chaplain, plus is 20 points more expensive. At first impressions I feel it's more sort of balanced as opposed to directly better. If you've got a whole bunch of chaplains in the army though, and it's kind of likely to not have the Objective Control problem, then I feel like it's probably the superior choice. The Bile Predators are 135 points, up from 125. This one broadly didn't change too much in the Codex besides getting the assault keyword that works against everything and not just against infantry now. And it can still be very fast, being able to advance and reroll the advance roll. I feel like the points increase from 125 to 135 means it's overall nerfed post-Codex, but not by loads. It's still going to be a fairly scary Overwatch gun turret in the mid-board, could certainly threaten the enemy infantry that try and move up to midfield objectives if you can see every bit of that objective. I do think it feels less standout at 135 though, after not having gains loads. For generic characters, the Blood Angels Captain on Foot is 80 points. He's the same points cost as the regular captain and does similar things pretty much. He has the big damage boost once per game plus the discounted stratagems. Compared with the regular Space Marine captain, he gets the option of an Inferno pistol as his sidearm, and I feel like that might have him be seen as the slightly superior datasheet. Certainly doesn't really seem any worse overall though. They've generally been really quite competitive Blood Angels units, often jumping out of impulsors at the side of assault intercessors, and then tearing it up on midfield objectives. The Death Company Captain variants, though, I think are far less lucky. 70 points for the standard on foot one, and 85 points for the jump pack captain. They're a little bit fightier than the chaplains, but between the chaplains +1 to wound buff and the fact that they get rid of the Death Company's OC0 thing, it just seems very hard to think why you'd take one of these over a chaplain. I was hoping that they'd be kind of significantly cheaper as a result, and they just look like more of a fun and fluff sort of pick for Lost Brethren if you want to take those enhancements. Finally, the Sanguinary Priest is 90 points. It's pretty much the same as before, but there's no option for the jump pack anymore. Again, he'll still be very nice with the assault intercessors on foot. Getting to AP2 is quite a nice break point, as is getting the 5+ feel no pain. I think he was usable before and will remain so now. You could have a big combo with him a captain as an assault intercessor squad, or charging out of a Land Raider, which seems all very scary when combined with Red Rampage. For the epic hero characters, the chaplains got rebalanced a bit. Asterath got big buffs in the Codex, getting devastating wounds with every charge, and 6 attacks with the Executioner's Axe, hitting at base strength 7 with precision. With all that though, he has gone up to 105 points from 85, so quite a big points increase there. I feel like he might be more usable for smaller squads of Death Company than bigger ones maybe, given that his datasheet is just a bit more skewed to be focused on personal melee strength as opposed to the buffing rule. He seems usable at that points cost, though I probably wouldn't say he's massively standout. The Martyrs, on the other hand, was a massive staple and often fairly auto-include in Blood Angels lists alongside a big Death Company unit pre-Codex. His datasheet didn't really change in the Codex. He still gives lethal hits and -1 damage to his unit, which is quite nice alongside the Feel No Pain. He dropped down from 120 points to 110, I think probably to represent the fact that the Death Company that he leads just aren't quite as valuable as they used to be. As mentioned, they've gone down from 5 big damage 2 weapons rather than 10 of them, though his buffing rules still seem to be easily well worth it for a big unit. I guess overall, if you take him with a big unit of 10 Primaris jump packs, the cost has now gone down around about 50 points on that combo, though given the loss of the Inferno pistols en masse and 5 Power Fists, they're not going to be quite as much kill everything no questions asked, even if they're still very scary. For the Angels in Gold, we've got Commander Dante, who went up to 130 points, 120 pre-Codex. He was solidly usable before, maybe not in every army list, but good enough. In the Codex he gained Strength 8 on his Axe Mortalis, and also got a +1 to advance as well as his +1 to charge that he had. And that +1 to advance is actually quite a big deal, given that you have access to advance and charge really easily now. Given that Sanguinary Guard that he often might be leading seemed to get a lot better, I feel like he's probably won out overall. Looks like it wouldn't hurt to have the big Strength 10 on that Axe Mortalis in the unit in Liberator Assault Group on the charge. The Sanguinor's 140 points, and he was unchanged in points and pretty much unchanged in rules in the Codex too. A big scary lone operative with 8 attacks at Strength 6, AP 3 and damage 2. And his signature ability to heroic intervene from off the board and swing a key combat in your favour via fights first. He did also get a couple of FAQs in this update, one confirming that you can't arrive him turn 1 in missions where reserves aren't allowed to arrive turn 1, such as the Pariah Nexus ones, though potentially if you want to do some gamey shenanigans you can potentially tag 2 enemy units provided at least one of them made a charge move. I'm sure a lot of the time it might not make sense to, but just occasionally that could allow you to do something really quite big and unusual. Pre-Codex he was typically considered really quite strong before and still will be now. He can make a really big entrance if you happen to be against a list with any melee, and beyond that he's just a fast, at least fairly tough and very dangerous lone operative, all of which are pretty good things. Maybe the biggest question is whether or not he'll compete well against Mephiston, who now has a very similar offering to him, though I guess you could have 2 very scary Angel lone operatives if you want. Speaking of which, Mephiston's 125 points, that's an increase of 25 points over his previous datasheet, which functioned very differently as a squad leader. For his points cost he seems kind of immense. Lone operative with fights first, like the Sanguinor, is all very nasty. His damage output is good against some things, but a bit less reliable against others. 6 attacks at Strength 9, AP 3, Damage D3 with devastating wounds. But otherwise his defense is massively tough. 6 wounds at Toughness 5 with a 2+ save and a 4+ feel no pain, so on average you have to slog through a big 12 wounds at that Toughness 5 profile, very nasty with access to Armour of Contempt. He moves fast with 7 inches with inbuilt advance and charge, has a little bit of pistol shooting when it's needed with Fury of the Ancients and a plasma pistol. He could fry a few elite infantry. And then finally he's got a disruptive chance to lock enemies in melee if they fail a leadership test when falling back. A lot of the time that won't do anything, and maybe it isn't worth trying to rely on too much, but just every so often that could be truly enormous and save him from a bunch of enemy shooting or doom an enemy unit that didn't want to stay in melee with his fightiness. Between that little lot, he just seems like a very, very good deal for 125 points, and I suspect that people are going to find a very good use for him in competitive lists. Finally, for the points changes and the FAQs, there were a few changes to the enhancements. About half of them stayed at the points cost printed in the Codex. Weirdly enough, the speed of the Primarch one with the Fights First one in Liberator actually got cheaper, which is kind of weird there, as that felt like the single most valuable one by a long way. I feel like one character should basically have that just to make their unit ridiculously hard to justify charging. Otherwise, the Gleaming Pinions at 25 points for Angelic Host. Again, they seem very good for the built-in reactive move. Could make for a very tricksy commander jumping into terrain when they're threatened. The Death Company ones looks like they remained untouched, though I think broadly they should have been a fair bit cheaper than these points printed across the board. The other thing that they fixed for the detachments was a stratagem called Death from the Skies. That's the flexible shoot and charge one after either advancing or falling back. Previously its wording was just a bit broken as he couldn't trigger it to activate the shooting bit and he could only use it for charging. Now you declare it in the movement phase, so that gets around that, though I guess it does mean that you do need to declare it a little bit earlier than you might otherwise need to. It wasn't just the Blood Angels changes that will impact them though. There were a few changes from core Codex Space Marines, a few bits of bad news, though a few bits of things that are okay. Jump Intercessors went up to 90 points, which I think wasn't too unexpected, and they'll still be absolutely great value for Blood Angels, which got better value out of them than basically anyone else. It does mean that the shine's taken off them a little bit, though I still think that most army lists will still be running plenty. There's still 160 points for 10-man squads as well, and Blood Angels feel like the army that can justify running those style squads far more than others. Vanguard Veterans also went up very slightly at 5 points per 5. They're a bit pricier, and I think they will suffer a bit from not having a Sanguinary Priest to lead them for the extra AP that they want. I think for a big investment damage dealer unit, I'd be more tempted by 3 Sanguinary Guard than 5 Vanguard Veterans at those kind of points costs, or perhaps go for their weight and jump intercessors with mortal wounds. Suppressors being 75 points could be interesting for Angelic Host with Deep Strikers as well. Could be interesting just to have some super cheap little jump pack units, and I guess they might have a little bit more argument for using them for that role rather than jump intercessors. Still seems like Inceptors will be a really interesting one for that force too. And otherwise both Terminators and Assault Terminators got a little bit cheaper as well. I think they're also pretty relevant for Blood Angels, as the Liberator Assault group generally takes them from being kind of mid-damage to outright scary damage with all those Strength 10 Power Fist attacks, particularly if they get the charge, but also Red Rampage can help out a lot as well. Finally, perhaps for the less good news, we've got the Legends datasheets. Added to the Blood Angels Legends, we've got Brother Corbulo, Captain Tycho and his Death Company datasheets, and Gabriel Seth. The 3 patterns of older style Dreadnought with the Death Company Furioso and Librarian Dread. The Death Company units with the Firstborn weapon options, with the ability to take mass power fists and inferno pistols or bolt guns and things. And then the Sanguinary Priest with the jump pack. Here are the points cost for them that they've added to the Legends field manual. And with Games Workshop's current stance on them, they are still very keen to encourage that they can be used in non-tournament games. For the most part, Legends things just don't really tend to be overpowered or anything, though some might vary a bit. But it's still generally bad news when things go there. Their models go out of production, and they generally get mothballed by Games Workshop over time, left out of balance updates should they need them for positive or negative, and not really considered too hard when they have further chapter updates. I guess it's possible that some of them might return with new models at some point. I feel like maybe Gabriel Seth could be the single most likely to out of all the models. I'm still holding out hope for some actual Primaris Death Company at some point. I'm sure it won't be in 10th edition, but hopefully further on we might get something different to the paint job plus eviscerator ones that we have right now. Overall though, from first impressions, I'm guessing that Blood Angels will be at least fairly strong from these points costs when taken in context of the detachment rules. I did feel that when the Codex came out, just the pure detachment rules of the Liberator Assault group alone were probably going to be enough to guarantee that Blood Angels were fairly strong, throwing Advance and Charge and Fights First into an already strong detachment. Out of these points costs, I'm perhaps most impressed by the Sanguinary Guard, looking very efficient at 135 points. I'd guess they might be the go-to big damage unit now, maybe supported by either a Jump Captain or Dante. Jump Intercessors still look absolutely fine for the Blood Angels at 90 points from the core Codex, as do Assault Intercessors with Captains in Impulsors. Both Mephiston and the Sanguinaur are looking really good. Disruptive, fast-moving, fights-first lone operatives with a bunch of damage feel like they're going to cause problems for the opponent most games, provided they pick their targets. I'd say that otherwise I'm a bit less convinced by the Death Company datasheets that we've seen so far in this update. From first impressions, I'd still say they're usable, but could be a bit less likely to be absolute mainstay powerhouse damage dealers as they were previously. In any case though, I'll certainly be interested to hear your guys' takes down in the comments, and also see what gets used in competitive lists when we start to see them hit the tournament scene. Finally though, I'll just cycle back to some fancy angelic style upgrades with the Crimson Lords by Greytide Studio, as one fun option to add a bunch of theme and styling to otherwise slightly less themed miniatures. We looked at a few bits earlier, though going through a bit more of their full range. Here are a few of their heads, where I do like the death mask style ones up at the top, or the sort of half theatre mask ones. They've got a whole bunch of shoulder pads with teardrops, chalices and wings and things. A bunch of themed regular backpacks to go on some more ground-bound infantry, and I must admit I did enjoy a bunch of their promo painted pieces, some really nice miniatures painted with the bits on show. Otherwise they've got some regular jetpacks, a whole bunch of claw and fist style power weapons, the winged jetpacks as mentioned earlier, a bunch of fancy pistols for some energy weapons to distinguish themselves from the rank and file, plenty of different custom weapons like those hammers and shields that we talked about earlier. They've got axes, chainsaws and fancy power sword things as well, and a bunch of centerpiece kits as well, such as these dreadnought compatible upgrades that could go on a Redemptor. This one feels like the sort of Death Company styled one with a whole bunch of skulls and some cross-patterned armor plates. As mentioned, there's just a whole ton of good stuff. Plenty of things like this physical bits pack, just for direct order as pieces that get sent to you in the post for your hobbying purposes, generally tending to be a bit more generous than similar sort of upgrade sprues that you might get from GW. And of course their main Kickstarter style My Mini Factory campaign, that one getting you the designs for the miniature pieces. That seems to be one of the single most popular ones of those style campaigns that I've ever seen, with around about 3,000 hobbyists backing it. In any case, a big thank you to them for sponsoring some Blood Angels content. Look forward to hearing all your thoughts on the points in the comments below though. What do you make of what Games Workshop's done with the Blood Angels? And look forward to hearing all your thoughts and ideas. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics. I'll certainly keep the regular 40k videos coming. I do tend to post new ones just about every day. If you'd like to support the channel, I'd just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well. That's linked down in the video description, and does have a few perks for people supporting there. Seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things come next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with a chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link's down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.